Hi, everyone. I apologize. I had some small technical difficulties, had to boot everyone out and have you come back in. Just waiting for Jim to get back in, who is here. Let's promote him to a panelist. And,
I am back on.
okay, let's see if this this will work this time. So let's go live on Facebook and hope that this works. I guess the problem is so many people are on Zoom these days that it's giving us more glitches than are anticipated. Fingers crossed it's going to work. And it does not look like it wants to work. So we may not be able to put this through to Facebook. So Jose, if you were on the call, maybe you can just let people know that we are going to try and do this recorded, and we will have to come back to it. So let me. Let's give it one last try. Let's go try, maybe I'll do it to a page. Thank you everyone for your patience. Almost there. If this doesn't work, then we will just kick it off without airing it live. And it doesn't look like it's going to work. So I'm assuming that this is going to be a Zoom problem. So let's just kick it off. We're recording now. Excellent. Let me just share with my screen. We've got a little intro going. For those of you who don't know, we've Facebook.
You might want to consider going to one car.
Formal systems. Like, that's ludicrous. Imagine.
So thank you everybody for joining us today. We have a special guest with us who many of you, I'm sure, recognize. He's been with us once before. Jim is one of North America's foremost thinkers on disruptive innovation. He's speaking internationally at more than 50 conferences a year. And Association Magazine has ranked him as one of North America's top 10 speakers. Jim also leads strategic planning sessions with executive teams, and his clients include Barclays Bank, Canon, General Motors, IBM, IBAO, Munich RE, SAP, the top 200 CIOs of India, the UK Cabinet Office, Swiss RE, Walmart, Zurich Insurance, and the CALU, to name just a few. Jim's last book, Blindsided, is published in over 80 countries worldwide and is the #1 international bestseller. And Soundview Executive Summary selected Blindsided as one of the best business books of the year, sending a summary to 80,000 executives globally. And the Miami Herald calls Blindsided brilliant stuff. I've known Jim for a long time, and he is just that, brilliant stuff. So we are very fortunate to have Jim with us today. And Jim is going to kick us off today with managing and thriving through disruption. And I'm going to close us out later going through the details of the CEWS program. I know there's going to be a lot of questions around CEWS, so I figured we'll hold that to the last part of the session. So if you have more questions on the subject, we can go long, and I'm happy to stay as long as we need to answer your questions about this really important wage subsidy. And I know a lot of you have some questions. We're getting them, and we'll be answering all of those for you today. So without further ado, Jim, why don't you take us away?
So I'm really excited to be doing this. Thank you, Andrew, and thank you, Rachel and Jose, for setting this all up. We're going to be looking at how to pivot and thrive amid the COVID crisis. If anybody wants to email me, it's just jim@jimharris.com. I'm on LinkedIn, and you can, if you're tweeting, just I'm at Jim Harris. So this is a favorite cartoon of mine by Tom Fishburne. And it's, you know, a boardroom, a CEO saying, you know, digital transformation is years away. You know, we don't have to do anything. There's going to be no change. Well, what the COVID crisis has shown is every organization that has put digital transformation first at the heart of its strategy is doing well. And those that have remained in the analog world are being crushed. So the toothpaste is out of the tube, the genie's out of the bottle. Things are never going to go back to the way they were. In December, Zoom had 10 million daily users, and by March that had spiked to 200 million daily users. In April, that grew another 50% to 300 million daily users. So my question is, how many companies have experienced a 30x growth in customer count during this COVID crisis? Do you know, this stat blows me away, the average North American worker spends 5 work weeks a year, 200 hours a year in traffic jams commuting to work. Is there nothing better that we can do with our time? So when we all go back to work, it's not going to be the way it was, because people are going to say, I don't want to spend an hour commuting to downtown Toronto, and I want to work from home for 2 or 3 days a week. And so do you realize that we in the GTA waste $10 billion of our time every single year in traffic jams? Is there nothing better we can do with $10 billion of time? So 70 million US households have a second car. And if people can work from home for 2 or 3 days a week and your spouse can, then people are going to say, well, hey, why don't we organize so that we can drop one of the 2 cars? And if we really need something in a pinch, we can use mobility as a service. The cost of a car is $70 a mile. That's been constant for 100 years. But once we have autonomous vehicles like autonomous Lyft and Uber, it moves to 1/3 of the cost. And who's going to buy another car? The auto industry is going to fall off a cliff. They already are, because nobody's buying cars during COVID. But longer term, they're going to fall off a cliff. It's good news, though, for Uber and Lyft and mobility as a service. Now, think about the implications of this for commercial real estate. If companies let people, you know, companies before this crisis said you cannot work from home. It was barred from a policy perspective. Now they're realizing people can. They're going to let people work for 2 or 3 days from home. And they're going to cut their square footage in half and drive millions of dollars directly to the bottom line. So what are the impacts? What are the implications for commercial real estate going forward? This is the value of Amazon yesterday compared to 8 retailers added together. You can take these 8 retailers, multiply it by 3, and it basically equals what Amazon equals. In 2019, only 16.3% of retail in the US was by e-commerce. And with the exception of grocery stores and pharmacies, every retailer is shuttered right now in North America and many parts of the world. So e-commerce is exploding, and millions of people are being introduced to how easy it is to shop on Amazon, how easy and convenient. So e-commerce is going to continue to explode and eat market share. You know, Amazon can't even keep up with the orders. So in March, they went out to the market to hire 100,000 people, and that wasn't enough. So in April, they went back to the market to hire another 75,000 people. So my question is, how many companies, how many retailers have hired 175,000 people during the COVID crisis? This just highlights the central thesis of what I'm arguing today, that companies that have put an aggressive digital transformation strategy in place way before this COVID crisis are thriving, and those that have remained analog are being crushed. Now, the good news is this is really great news for all of Andrew's and CPA for IT's clients, because as programmers, developers, app developers, the focus on digital transformation is going to boom. Year-over-year change in traffic to traditional retailers is down 97.6% at the end of March. This is Cowen and Company. That is totally crushing. J. Crew filed for bankruptcy on Monday. That was a retailer that Michelle Obama liked to wear. Today, Neiman Marcus, yesterday, Neiman Marcus filed for bankruptcy. High-end retailers. So UBS predicts that 100,000 retail stores in the US will permanently close in the next few years as a result of this COVID crisis. So retailers that didn't focus on an e-commerce strategy are really going out of business. And in fact, Credit Suisse predicts that 25% of US shopping malls will shutter between now and 2025. Not quite as bad a situation for Canada because shopping malls are more overbuilt in the US. But what are the implications for pension funds? You know, where do investment advisors and pension fund managers place money? You know, in real estate, you know, things you can trust like blockbuster locations. So what we've talked about so far, and maybe Andrew and Rachel and Jose who are on the line, we can take some questions by chat if there are any questions at this point. So if you have any questions at this point, just type them in and Andrew will ask them. But we've talked about Zoom and working from home, commuting versus telework, second car sales, mobility as a service, the value of commercial realty, office hoteling, meaning just like when I go to Philadelphia, I don't buy a house, I just rent a room for a night. So it's going to be the same with office space. You're going to call up work and say, hey, I'm going to come in on Wednesday. I want an office in the boardroom. And how do pensions invest in Canada? So do you see some implications for you in the IT world? Andrew, have any chats come through?
So we don't have any chats coming through yet. I'm just letting people know in the chat panel that if you do have any questions, that we can use also the Q&A. So some people may not be as familiar with Zoom. So at the bottom of the Zoom tab itself, you should have a couple of links, including Q&A and chat. So please feel free to post any questions that you might have coming in. And unfortunately, we do have about a number of people, about 30 people who are online right now watching this seminar. Unfortunately, we were not able to get this live on Facebook, which is unfortunate. So we'll do a pre-recorded and post that there. So we do have one Q&A that's come through, and it says it's from our friend and client who asks, how much of all of this was a trend anyway, even without COVID-19? Are we just accelerating through it?
Don, that's a great question. And these trends, like Amazon was founded decades ago. So you know the expression, it takes 20 years to be an overnight success. Well, that's really the situation with Amazon. And Zoom, the founder of Zoom, used to work at Cisco with their WebEx product and identified all the pain points of WebEx being, he wanted to create a a more popular platform with a lower price point for entry. So that's what Zoom is. So these are trends that are 20 years in the making, but what COVID has done is supercharge them. So great question. I'm going to go back to the material. If you've been enjoying this, you can get this 2000 World article. It's a cover story I wrote for Disruption magazine. And I got a question for you, Andrew. They sent a photographer to our office to take 300 photos of me, and this is the one they picked. So, Andrew, I want to ask you, do I A, look sinister? Do I B, look evil? C, do I look demonic? Or D, all of the above?
I'm going to go with a little bit of all the above. And I know I've mentioned you that there's something about this that just says Game of Thrones to me.
Winter is coming.
There is
so, so like winter has come with COVID, right?
Yeah.
So if you want this, just email me, jim@jimharris.com, or connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'll send it to you after this presentation. So let's just continue on. Here's something that blows me away. The value, the market cap of Tesla is greater than Ford, added to General Motors, added to Fiat Chrysler, and doubled. In other words, Tesla's market cap is 140 billion, and the other three Detroit automakers is 61 billion. This blows me away. If you don't think that electrification of vehicles is going to change the market, look at this graph. It blows me away. Disruption is on the way because Tesla is now taking insurance for its owners in California. Why? They know the accident rate on Teslas is going to be way lower because of all the autopilot features. So they're offering insurance to Tesla owners at 20 to 30% less than traditional auto insurers. Is that going to change the market? Absolutely.
So we've got a couple of questions that have come in for you, Jim.
Okay, let's take them.
So I guess the first question, actually the last question, but most timely with the presentation, is coming from another friend and client. He wants to know if you think that Tesla is overvalued in this case.
Well, it has a pretty high valuation. And Elon just tweeted something out a couple of days ago that he thought it was overvalued. So yes and no. What happens when we get autonomous vehicles as a service, and you can, you know, when I go on holidays, I can just put my Tesla into Tesla's autonomous vehicle Lyft equivalent, Uber equivalent program and make money while I'm away. In other words, the car drives, picks people up, charges their credit cards, comes back, plugs itself into the charging station. You know, the car is just working completely remotely. That is the vision, where I buy 120,000 new Model S, and I earn it out when I'm not using it. Do you know the average person only uses their car 4% of the time? So with the classic model of what a car company is, yes, it's overvalued, but once it's selling insurance, once we have autonomous vehicles, mobility as a service, the total game changes. Like the transportation market is $10 trillion. So it's not just the value of cars that is what is driving Tesla's valuation. Great question.
Okay, we've got quite a few more actually that have come through. So let me know how many you can answer now and where you.
Well, let's do speed questions.
Speed questions. Okay. So there are certain jobs that are measurable for output and certain jobs that are not. So not everybody can let their employees to work remotely, and some people need the pressure of being at work to be productive. And that sort of goes in line with another question we had, which says, from a moral and motivation point of view, not all employees will opt to work from home, as there is no separation between work at home, which will have a potential impact on mental health. So I guess the real questions is all around, you know, the shift that obviously a lot of people have been forced into work remotely, and some people love it, some people hate it. Everyone who asks me, the general response is, I say, kids, my staff that have kids hate it. My staff without kids love it.
Yeah. So we're going to reach a new equilibrium. And if people aren't productive when they work from home, they're going to be the ones that are coming into the office, or if they're not meeting their quotas or being productive, they'll be required to come into the office. So we will find a new equilibrium, but we will not need 100% of the square feet of commercial real estate that companies have right now.
Yeah.
Great question.
And I think that there are ways to create work at home divide. I know I've heard from a lot of accountants over the years who have remote offices and how they do it. Some people, it's just they literally have, whether it's a basement office or a separate office, when they go into that office, they lock the door, that's their office, and that's how they create the separation. Some people don't like to have the separation. Some people enjoy having that mix of going back and forth. So, there's some impact, but there's some ways to manage that impact. Another question which sort of ties into this is in regards to consultants and conference speakers like yourself. Will you have to reinvent themselves post-COVID? And will we ever go back to in-person conferences or on-premise consultations? What's your thought on that, Jim?
So yes and no. We're going to gradually come back. So groups of 10 people will be able to meet. But that's not a 5,000 person conference. That will be way down the road. So companies have to pivot really quickly in order to thrive, survive, and thrive in this crisis environment. So my business, which is speaking at large conferences, I've pivoted completely to doing webinars. Now, one of the interesting insights is, if I was giving a presentation in Dubai, I had to fly over there, go a day early because it's a 15-hour flight, present, maybe stay around for a day and come back. So that's like a 5-day trip for a 1-hour presentation. That is sucking up a lot of time. It's like that commuting study of 5 weeks. So if I can do presentations for an hour all around the world virtually, I can do a lot more presentations in a year and have higher revenue by charging less. So it's going to be a new game. Let's continue on because I only have 9 more minutes and I want to get through this next tranche of material.
Sure.
So this is the classic exponential law, Moore's law. Way back in the 1970s, there were 2 million transistors on a CPU, and now it's 44 billion. Staggering. And what that means is the cost of doing 1 billion transactions in a single second has gone from $153 billion on mainframes in 1961 to a penny in 2019. And that figure is so 2019 because it's going to go in half of that this year. So what does that mean? It means compute power is free and it's at the edge, meaning on my mobile. In 1997, when IBM's Deep Blue beat Garry Kasparov in chess, that was $100 million project. And do you know that this smartphone I carry in my hip pocket has more raw computing power than IBM's Deep Blue in 97? In other words, I'm carrying a supercomputer in my pocket at all times. And if companies are not using it, for instance, the majority of Canadian companies do not have an app. Do you see a problem here? How do they market to the millennial generation that is smartphone centric in their lives? So not only is technology cheaper, lighter, faster, smaller, more versatile, more applications, greater accuracy, it enables new business models and different ways of interacting with the customer. So think about this. Facebook has announced it's going to launch Libra, which is a cryptocurrency. Imagine sending and receiving money to anyone who's on Facebook is as easy as instant message, as easy as IMing. Is that going to be a threat to banks, to credit card companies? You bet it is. Um, this is a powerful statement. A crisis is a terrible thing to waste. I just renegotiated my mortgage. And by the way, anybody who's on the call, this is a great time to consult with your bank. My old mortgage was at just under 4%. My new mortgage is 2.5%. I paid to break my old mortgage to get this lower rate because I'm going to save over $100,000 in interest over the next 5 years. So we're having the lowest mortgage rates in, well, I talked to a mortgage broker, lowest rates in 40 years. In her experience, 2.44. So I'm at 2.5. So I'm 6 basis points off the lowest ever in 40 years on a fixed 5-year. So a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. How are we going to do this? Now, I just signed documents with my bank. My bank never let me sign them virtually before. Now, they're not going to get any mortgages because nobody can go into the branch. So all sorts of insurance companies and banks and financial institutions are now using e-signatures or DocuSign. And just for full disclosure, I was a pre-IPO investor in DocuSign. I don't hold any stock in it now. Cash used to be king, but when the COVID crisis broke out in China, China went and washed all its currency and coins so that the virus wouldn't be transmitted on currency. This spells the death of cash. And it means that this is smartphone-based financial transactions in China growing exponentially, $39 trillion of smartphone-based financial transactions, sending and receiving in essence, currency on the smartphone. This is going to be a game changer. Hasn't hit with this vigorous level of adoption in North America, but it's going to. And that means things like Square, Venmo, Bitcoin, alt currencies, PayPal are all going to continue to explode. This is a threat to traditional financial institutions. What about Apple getting in on designer credit cards, So everything is changing. And this rate of change is accelerating. It took the airline industry 68 years to reach 50 million customers, and it took Pokemon Go 19 days. The rate of change is accelerating. So we're going to just look at, here are more than 15 different exponentially accelerating tech trends. I'm just going to touch on mobile smartphones and AI. At the Consumer Electronics Show, this chip won an innovation award. It's an AI chip. It's the smallest AI chip, lowest power, and it can go in any device, even the tiniest hearing aid. And these are going to explode. 500 million sold this year predicted, and $1 billion in 24. And what it means is they're going to go into our smartphones, so our smartphones are going to get smarter. So we're medicalizing smartphones now. So this is an application from Cambridge University that when you cough, your smartphone listens to you and predicts whether you have COVID or not.
And that's Cambridge University, not Cambridge Analytics, right?
Yes. Yes, absolutely right. If you have COVID, you end up in the later stages having problems breathing because you can't get enough oxygen. It can tell early warning signs of when you have COVID and warn you. This can tell if your kid, it's a modification to a smartphone. It's just a little piece of paper that tells whether they have an inner ear infection or not. AI is getting so smart that with high-res cameras, like my smartphone has a 40 megapixel res camera, you can take a picture of an iris and tell what is the gender of this person, what's their age, what's their blood pressure, are they a smoker, are they at risk of stroke or heart attack? So imagine you can get all this diagnostics from your smartphone, and it's not just your smartphone, it's your wearables. Before a plane takes off, the pilots check every single system to make sure it's working before they take off and before they land. Well, imagine we could do that every morning with ourselves, you know, so that if we are going to have a problem, a health problem, we know before we have it. You know, the AI predicts from your heart rhythms, you're probably going to have a heart attack in 10 days. So let's get busy and get to the hospital now before you have the heart attack or stroke. So why can't we just have these kind of simple symbols pop up on our smartphone instead of for our car, but for our health? You know, heart, stroke. Telemedicine is exploding because who wants to go sit in a doctor's waiting room while other people are coughing all over you? So telemedicine was prohibited in many jurisdictions, and the barriers are being broken. 300 million Chinese have downloaded this telemedicine app. 300 million. China way ahead of us, and 50% of all medical visits during the pandemic outbreak in China were by telemedicine. In fact, they even had booths that, this is pre-COVID, you can go to this booth, remotely talk to a doctor, and then the dispensary is right next door. You say, you know, the most popular or frequently prescribed medicines are right next door in a vending machine. We can use our smartphones for contact tracing. Billions of people could be contact traced through smartphone. The problem isn't the technology, it's the barriers in our minds and the regulatory barriers. This is a brace, an antique brace that my dad used. He was great at working with wood. I still have it, it's in my garage. You know, every company that used to make braces went bankrupt when electrification came along. And it's the same with AI. Every company, every industry that uses AI is going to outperform those that don't. So we're right at 1 o'clock. So I'm going to skip to here and then just say, I've really enjoyed this. I'm looking forward to the next half of our seminar. If anyone wants to email me, it's jim@jimharris.com. I'm on LinkedIn and on Twitter, and happy to hang in here if there are any questions at the end after Andrew's portion. So email me if you want the article. I want to thank Rachel again and Jose for all their work. And what a couple of handsome guys here. Oh my God. Good looking guys here presenting to you today. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and back to you, Andrew.
Thanks, Jim. Really appreciate that. Do you have time? We have a couple of straggling questions from throughout the webinar. Do you have just a few minutes before I go into my section here?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. So first of all, a couple of great comments and questions. First is from one of our attendees who points out quite correctly that smartphones are really becoming tricorders. You know, Star Trek was so visionary. Gene Roddenberry, absolute genius. I'm a huge geek and huge fan. And they definitely are becoming tricorders, medical tricorders, transcription, language, everything that we saw in a tricorder and more. So that was just a comment that I found very apt. Another was around the interest rates when you're talking about mortgages. They were wondering if you think that banks will start going to negative interest rates like they have in Europe, where they would pay us to borrow. I find that hard to believe, but I mean, anything's possible.
So I'm not an economist, but when I broke my existing mortgage and renegotiated at 2.5%, I talked to a mortgage broker who said, look, I've been in this business 40 years and the lowest I've ever seen is 2.44. If it goes lower than that, that's great. But I locked in at 2.5 just because, like, how much better can it really get? Maybe it can get better. Maybe they'll pay me to own my house. I don't know. But for fixed mortgages, 2.5 is amazing. So I just wanted to seize it. And it cost me, I think, about $8,200 to break my mortgage. but I'm going to save 100,000 in interest payments over the 5 years. So it was a good economic analysis to
ROI.
say for 8 grand, you're going to save 100.
Yeah, absolutely. A bit of a typical question, but I think a great question for you is he's wondering if anyone is recycling Amazon boxes because he's got so many of them now that everyone's ordering
Yeah.
digital.
Yeah, I hear you. I feel your pain. We have a ton of them too at the office. Like
Mhm.
we just don't ship as much stuff out as we get shipped in. So yeah, anybody need any boxes?
Yeah. Maybe there's going to be a whole new industry that starts up out of leveraging Amazon boxes to build kids' toys. Because I know my kids probably prefer an Amazon box as a toy than just about any other toy they can get. Um, another comment here is just that, as you can probably hear,
I hear your kids in the background.
the joys of working from home. So a few other comments, just that someone was able to get 1.5% as a variable for their mortgage, which is great.
Yeah.
And I think one of the, other questions, it's a comment / question here, relates to the shift for speakers and consultants moving from physical to digital. And he says sometimes during presentations, you have to assess the reaction of people and make eye contact to assess emotions, which you cannot do remotely in a webinar. So certainly in a webinar like today, we're not seeing all the attendees. In a Zoom meeting where you would have everyone, you can get some of that, but it's still not the same, is it?
Well, I like seeing everyone, and my Zoom screen, because I have a 4K monitor,
Mhm.
it can take, I don't know, 50 people per screen or something. Like it's this huge number. So yeah, I can't see all 1,000 or 500 people in a conference, but I can have a representative sample of 50 of them and see their reactions.
Yeah.
And if a bunch of people are going, you go, oh, maybe I haven't explained that well enough. So I love those visual cues too when I'm present, but we can get pretty close to it.
Yeah, and there's just interesting ways that people are shifting and changing. I think one of the most interesting things I saw recently was a drive-in concert. Have you seen that? So it's the guys up there and there's a stage and everything, but instead of people being in the crowd, it's cars, like a parking lot type of thing. So you have these drive-in concerts where people are dancing in their car, so to speak. So I think our ability to adapt and be creative is unstoppable. And I think that things are going to shift. We know that there's a massive shift going on right now. Some of it was happening already. Like you look at Shopify, it was already growing. We knew it was going to be a big factor in the Canadian economy, but it's because of COVID-19 that it overtook RBC to be the largest publicly traded company in Canada. So I think, as you mentioned so aptly, that COVID has catapulted those who had embraced technology and leveraged it to move forward. It is forcing those of us who hadn't embraced it to make a shift. It will probably never go back to what it was. It will go back to something similar, but like you talked about, even money, like I'm never going to deal with cash again unless I absolutely have to. I never used it before. I never used it. I rarely used it. I always had some in my pocket in case of emergency, but using Tap, using Venmo, using PayPal, using Stripe, all these online payments is going to be exacerbated and grow even more. So I think we're in.
So I've got one thing to add to this, which is really interesting. So I had a client just working with insurance, and one guy used to drive to Waterloo and meet a prospect for 15 to 45 minutes, sign a deal, and then I'd drive 2 hours back. So that's like a 5-hour round trip.
Mhm.
Now, you just meet the prospect by Zoom. You save the 4 hours of commuting in a day. You do what ifs on the screen in Excel. You can show them their financial future based on a whole set of variables that you plug in real time. You agree, they e-sign it, and boom, it's done. and you just save 4 hours of commuting. So how many more people can you pitch if you're an insurance agent?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it opens up the doors in so many ways. It breaks down borders. That's why we've been such a big believer in technology. Now, we do have one last question as it relates to sort of your presentation. We've got a couple coming in already around some of the government programs, which I will answer as we go into my section. But someone has a mortgage that looks like it's up for renewal in September, and they're wondering if they should break their contract now.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, here's the thing. If you are in the last 3 months, typically there's no penalty to break it. And there's something called interest rate differential. And so you get 3 months grace anyways, and you might only be paying some interest differential for 1 or 2 months. So look at the rates that you can get. Make the decision yourself. And talk to a mortgage broker, because then you have leverage when you negotiate with your bank. They may give you, they have a published rate for the general public, but if you're going to keep your mortgage with them, they'll give you a rate that's 10 or 20 basis points even lower than what the published rate is on their website in order to retain your business. So, do your research. It's well worth it.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I think that's the key is really, it starts with the research. You need to figure out your own situations, assess it, talk to brokers, find out what the variable rates are. And then it's very easy to do a comparison and say, okay, what's my cost to break my mortgage? What's my cost to break the mortgage? What is going to be the savings by saving a couple percentage points each year? And then make basically a very financial, logical decision as to whether it makes sense to make the shift. And with that, I think, Jim, thank you again for your time. You're welcome to hang around as well. I'm going to break into a bit of a section on the emergency wage subsidy, the Canadian Emergency Wage Subsidy now. So what I'm going to do is feel free to post all your questions now. I will get to every question that gets posted. I'm going to start with the presentation and sort of just go through from there, and then I'll come back to some questions because hopefully I'll answer some of those as I go. Now, one of the things I wanted to share again is that, we have a number of great resources in the Facebook group that we have created. We are doing our best to provide as much help and support to the community of small business owners, not only our clients, but anyone. So if you have any friends who are small business owners, we do encourage and welcome you to share this content with them and this Facebook group. So we do welcome this group to everybody. It's a closed group just so that we can approve those coming in. But we do encourage and would appreciate your support in sharing this group, because if we can answer the question once and we can answer the question for many people, I think that goes a long way. One of the things I wanted to point out was one of the things you may not have noticed is there's this popular topics area. So we've gone through to sort of categorize some of the areas, because I know a lot of you are wondering, there's been so much content on this. So if you're looking for a specific program, you can go in here and look at the CERB program to find all the programs or all the posts related to CERB. You can go into the CEWS and go to all the posts related to the CEWS. What we're going to do today is we're going to go for a walkthrough through one of the posts that we created. So we did this post, I guess, last week after the application was made available, to give you an exact screen-by-screen walkthrough of what the application process for the Canadian Emergency Wage Subsidy looks through. So you can get to that, like I said, through the Facebook group. Click on the link, it'll take you over to our website, and there is a screen-by-screen resolution. Some of this is just getting started with the login process, which I'm going to assume at this point you guys know how to log into your CRA online portal. Again, if you don't have access to an online portal, we have a tutorial on a blog post on how to create that. Once you log in, you're going to click on the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy link here. That's going to take you to your first one of 3 pages that you've got to complete. And what you're going to do on this very first page is select the period that you are applying for. Now, one of the things, as we've mentioned in a number of our emails and posts, in our conversations with CRA agents, they are accepting for non-arm's length employees annual pay periods as a baseline, but you should be on monthly payroll to apply, and you should be running your monthly payroll before you apply, because they're going to be looking at that to confirm your eligibility. So if you go and apply and you haven't run your monthly payroll for this period that you are applying for, you are most likely going to be denied for that application. So what that means is, if you are doing the March 15th payroll run, you will need to make sure that you have done a March payroll remittance. That could have been due either April 3rd, 10th, or 15th, depending on your remitting threshold. There are some potential late fees associated with not having done that. But if you're eligible, it's probably worthwhile having those late fees. Again, if you haven't filed and you are eligible, and you want some help on figuring out how much to remit for that period, feel free to send a message into our hotline, COVID-19 at cpa4it.ca, and we'll do everything that we can to help. But this first page is really simple. Just choose the period in which you are applying for. So for most of you at this point, that's probably going to be the March 15th to April 11th. Now, in order to qualify for this first period, what that means is you need to have had a loss of 15% in the month of March, either year over year, so March 1st, even though, and this is where it's confusing a lot of people. We're doing an application for CEWS for the pay period from March 15th to April 11th. But the comparison for whether you're eligible is March 1st, 2019 to March 28th, 2019, compared to March 1st, 2020 to March 29th, 2020. Or alternatively, you are also able to do a calculation of the average of January and February for 2020 against March's number. Now for March, you're going to have to be down 15%. For April and May's, you have to be down 30%. Now, what's really interesting is if you qualify for 1 month, you automatically qualify for the next month. So if you were to qualify for the 15th to 11th, so your March revenue is down, you were going to automatically qualify for the 12th. You don't have to do a comparison, but you're going to have to do a comparison for May to make sure that you still qualify. Likewise, if you didn't qualify for March, but you did qualify for April, then you're going to automatically qualify for May. So this is, there's some more information again on the FAQ side of the website to figure out how you are to determine whether you are eligible. I'm going to mention that, but I'll stay fairly brief. If you have more questions on that, let me know, and we'll try to come back to that. The next page that you're going to go through is where we start to begin to enter some of the meat. So the first question is number of eligible employees. So this is pretty straightforward, and this would be the total number of eligible employees. The total eligible remuneration paid would be the weekly pay during those periods. The payroll from March 15th to April 11th, which is a 4-week period. So assuming that you're paying yourself the same this year as you did last year, because that's going to be your baseline for non-arm's length employees, you take your salary, divide it by 52, and multiply it by 4 to get your total eligible remuneration. Whether you've retroactively rehired 1 or more employees during this period, you would just say yes or no. Most of you, that is going to be a no. This is also related to if you've rehired someone, but you are not paying them, you're eligible to get some of the CPP, which is on the next page, and other benefits returned, as well as the 847. Now this is up to, what I should say is, when I talked about your baseline salary divided by 52 times 4, up to the maximum, right? So the maximum being 847. And so there's a little bit more information here about that. If you have any questions, let me know. We get into the next section, which is the basic emergency wage subsidy. So this is by default, if you are eligible for this, you have to put in this amount. Whether you have reduced your payroll contributions already for the wage subsidy, you have to put this in. Now, again, this is going to be fairly straightforward. It's going to be 10% of your payroll during this period, up to a maximum of 1,375. The one thing to keep in mind is you might have 500 in the first period, 500 in the second period, and 375 in the next period. So it is really important to keep track of that. Again, in our Facebook group, we do have a link to the TWS spreadsheet to help you keep track of that. And you can use that to figure out how much would be applicable during this period. But effectively, it's going to be 10% of your payroll up to a maximum of 1,135. Line D and line E are going to be related to anyone who has rehired someone who will be paid through furlough. So the idea of this wage subsidy was that some people would be rehired but not have to work. So they could be paid to effectively sit at home. And there's an additional benefit for the EI and the CPP or QPP and QPIP, if you're in Quebec, that you could receive back. If you are like most of our independent contractors and you're not rehiring someone to sit back on furlough, the answer to this question is going to be simply 0 and 0. Next, we're into line F, which is the amount eligible to be claimed under the 10% wage subsidy for employers. I thought I read that already. Did I mess something up here? I did. I think on line C, I was referring to that as the TWS, the basic amount that you can claim for the period. So this is where so your first page is your eligible, and then the amount that you can actually claim in the wage subsidy. So you would have your, I apologize if I've created confusion here. I jumped ahead of myself. So line C is the maximum amount that you could get. So it's either 847 or 75% of your payroll in that period if it's less than the 847. So I apologize. Now this section is where we put that eligible portion of the TWS, temporary wage subsidy. So you would put in here the 10% of your payroll, as I mentioned before, up to the maximum of 1,375. And the employees under the work sharing program, you would enter any amounts here. Again, that would be 0. So most of our clients are going to have a number here. Whether you have claimed it or not, you would need to put a number in here for the temporary wage subsidy if you're eligible, which I think there's not one of our clients who is not eligible for the temporary 10% wage subsidy. So you should all have a number in there. Very few of you are going to have anything in the work sharing program, so that would be a 0. Line H is going to be calculated for you automatically. And then lastly, we just come to the attestation. So the attestation is basically you're going to read through this, make sure that you are attesting this, because this is basically you signing a legal document. And we want to be very, very careful that obviously, and most importantly, that we have not provided any misleading information, any incorrect information, and that we truly are eligible for this program. Because the penalties for making an application and receiving a benefit, if you were not eligible or if you gamed the system in any way, shape, or form, are, as we mentioned before, 25%. You would have to return the entire wage subsidy plus pay back 25%. To certify, it's basically fairly simple. You take a box, enter your name, enter your phone number, and hit submit. And that is the end of the process. And then you will provide a confirmation that your application is completed. Now, one of the things we talked about earlier was in calculating whether you're eligible for this program. And I said I would somewhat breeze over that because I think we may even circle back and do a more in-depth session on determining whether you qualify, because I know that seems to be a big area. And there are some elections that have to be kept on hand, and there's a specific government form. I'll get the link and share it out later. I don't have it with me right now, but I'll put it into our Facebook group. So if you're making an election to either use the cash basis instead of the accrual basis, you have to write an election. You don't have to submit it anywhere, but you do have to keep it on hand. So that would be basically making an election to use cash over accrual. So I think some of you are certainly familiar with that. High level accrual is for work earned during the period, regardless of when you received the income for those invoices. Cash is based off of when you received the income rather than when the invoice was dated. So you can choose to use either method. If you use one method, you have to stick with that method and you have to make an election and keep that election on hand. Secondly, if you make an election to use the alternate reporting period. So the default reporting period is month over month, March to March, April to April, March to March, obviously 2020 versus 2019. That is the default. If you are going to use the alternative method, which is average of January and February to March or to April or to May, then again, you have to stick with that. Once you choose it, you stick with it, and you must again have an election. So you could potentially be sitting on election where you've elected 2 outliers. It is one form, and you would choose, it's a tick box effectively, so you choose which elections you are making on that. So you may be making multiple elections on that form. So now I can see that we've got some questions coming up in both the chat and the Q&A. So I'm going to open it up now for Q&A. And again, I do encourage people, we've got a ton of information in the Facebook group. If you haven't checked it out, come in here, go through the different sections. You can see all the different links that we've gotten. Look through the program as a way to find information, as well as use the actual search, which is over here on the left-hand side. So let me take a quick look at the Q&A here.
So while Andrew's looking at the Q&A, one of the things I wanted to mention is I have been working with CPA for IT, formerly known as Wallen Associates, for I guess it's 25 or 30 years. And Andrew Wall is our accountant at Strategic Advantage and mine personally. And I worked with George Wall, Andrew's dad, before Andrew. So just a little testimonial that it's a great company, and thank you for providing this value to all your clients during this very difficult time.
You're more than welcome. So let's just start. I'm going to start with my first question here, which is actually in the chat, and then I'll go over to the QA. So hi, Andrew, I'm about to start monthly source deductions. If you're still earning some income, can you still claim the 10% wage subsidy? In this case, should I just start my source deductions for April and May? So on from here, will there be a late penalty for April? So most of our clients are probably going to have a May 15th or a 15th of the month deadline, and we have a whole webinar you can find on our YouTube channel around source deductions and payroll remittances to help you figure out what threshold you are. Most people are probably either the 10th or the 15th. So even if you're the 10th, you could make a payment in theory today. It will clear by Monday and be on time. And if you're the 15th, you've got even more time. If you happen to be the 3rd, which is pretty rare for most of our clients, then you would be late for April's. You're definitely going to be late for March. We do have a couple of tricks up our sleeve when you are late, and so if you are late and going to be making a contribution, I would say have a conversation with either myself or your account manager around that, and we can show you some little tricks that we've figured out over the years that can help minimize that penalty, but there will be some penalties. Now, whether you should apply for March, April, or May, of course, depends on what you're eligible for. Generally speaking, I would say if you're eligible for March, even though you're late in the source deduction remittance, I would still do it because in theory, I mean, I guess it depends on every situation and how much baseline salary that you have, but in theory, you should be receiving more of a benefit than any cost for the late penalties. So hopefully that answers your question. Now, got some more in the Q&A here, which is, can a business benefit from the CEWS if they got $40K loan from the government? Yes. So the CEBA, this is a bit unusual to me. I don't know where this confusion has come from. I've heard it more than once. But yes, you're eligible for both the CEBA and the temporary wage subsidy and the Canadian Emergency Wage Subsidy, all three. What you weren't eligible to do is do the CERB and a wage subsidy, because the CERB basically says you're not earning any income. The CEWS is only for earned income, so you can't get both. So the TWS, CEWS, and CEBA all three are eligible for small businesses based on the various criteria. In theory, again, keep in mind that a lot of the reason that the 40K program was put in place was to be able to help companies manage payroll and manage these ongoing costs that they're going to have when they've got no income coming in. So I've applied for CERB and received my second check, I believe, a monthly payment of $2,000 for 4 months. I think it's 3 months, but I'll double check. I've spent more time on the wage subsidy. I believe it's for 3 months, not 4 months, but I should double check that because I'm going on memory rather than what it is. I want to apply for the wage subsidy and where the CERB payments has to be returned to CRA. I qualify for the $847 per week for March 15th. How many weeks would payment be made for? So there's 3 months of eligibility, so a total of 12 weeks that are available for the CEWS. My understanding is that's the exact same as the CERB. Don't hold me to that. I should double check that, but that's my understanding. Also, due to the CERB payments that have already been made, will CRA just deduct what has already been paid to me? No, they will not. It is your responsibility to return that. They do have programs and information on how to return the CERB. Again, we will post some links into the Facebook group around how to do that. But there's a specific way to repay that. And there's lots of information on the CRA website, which we will share to the Facebook group. So my year end is August 31st. Usually the salary is declared based on the director's advance during a review meeting in November. Can I pay source deductions based on 58,725, the amount required to qualify for the CEWS, and pay the rest of source deductions in January when the rest of the salary is due? Yes. So there's not necessarily an issue for paying less than your baseline. The issue is really around paying more than your baseline. So you could do the you could do the maximum amount, which is around $60,000 or 58,725, and then top up your salary for November or December, as long as we make those payroll contributions in those months in which we top it up. So that's not a bad strategy, and in fact, a strategy being used by a number of people. Your earlier position was not to apply for CEWS and wait until the fiscal year end of the company, August 31st, 2020, and then apply later. So I guess maybe there was maybe a bit of confusion on that. Our earlier advice was to hold off until we had more information on CEWS, because I know a lot of people were really anxious to get in there. And most importantly, the big concern for us was around whether you would be able to qualify, because most of our clients are non-arm's length, and most of our clients are paid annually as opposed to monthly payroll remittance. And there was some big doubt as to whether they would be eligible. Now, what I will tell you, and most of our clients know, because we've shared more details about this than I can share here, we have had conversations with a CRA agent. That is a CRA agent. It doesn't necessarily hold any legal weight, but it does help defend our position for why we've come to this conclusion. So I would suspect that at the very least, they're not going to hit anyone with any penalties for doing this, but it doesn't mean that they will not come back and say that agent was incorrect and that's not how we're interpreting it, and now you're not eligible. But we are a lot more comfortable than we were. I would say we're about 80 to 90% comfortable that this strategy is effective, but there's always that bit of that unknown. So at this point, we are saying those who are eligible for the CEWS should go ahead and apply. Now, there is a deadline by which you must apply if you plan to apply. That at the moment is September 30th. So the temporary wage subsidy doesn't have that same deadline. So there's no real issues there with the TWS, but the CEWS does have a hard stop at the moment of September 30th. When we switch from annual to monthly, technically we're late with source deduction. Does this mean we will have to pay a penalty? If you think we do not have to pay a penalty, then you defend us in the event that CRA comes after us. So penalties for source deductions are very straightforward. If you're a minute late, you have a 10% penalty. And so if we are late with source deductions, yeah, there will be penalties. The question is it going to be worth it to have penalties to be able to qualify for the program? And in most situations, that answer is yes. And as I mentioned earlier, we've got some strategies that we can discuss offline on how to minimize those. And again, what we're probably talking about now is doing monthly remittances for March, April, and May. So at this point, most of you should only really have a penalty for March. And if you make your payment today, you shouldn't have any issues with the April deadline. Will you be able to send an email with a simple spreadsheet or point us to a website that will help us with the amount of CPP and taxes to remit? Yes, we can. And in fact, most of you would have received as part of your tax planning a tax planning worksheet, which is an Excel file. That worksheet can be used to help you figure out the remittance amount. So if you got a PDF, you can just divide your numbers. If you're assuming you're using the same salary by 12. If not, I will post our spreadsheet, which is the one we use for our tax planning, where you can put in the salaries and it will calculate. It does calculate on an annual. You will obviously need to divide that by 12 for the monthly remittances. So we will share that with you guys in the Facebook group again. As I mentioned, the deadline for the CEWS is September 30th. When we switch from annual salary to monthly, do we have to pay source deduction bi-weekly or monthly? Monthly is fine. Again, it's usually based off your threshold, but at this point, we are going with monthly, and monthly seems to be okay. Can we go back to declaring annually from monthly when the dust settles? Yes, there will potentially be some increased attention when you do that, but you are technically allowed to do that. We just have to tell them, because you're going to get a letter from CRA, which is quite common, saying, how come you have no employees with any eligible remittances? You have to reply and just simply say, I have no employees within any eligible remittances during this period. So you can go back. Now, that being said, this is one of the things that is maybe worth a bit of a discussion about here. My dad was the one to sort of pioneer the annual payroll strategy. It is legal, it is valid, and allows people to defer that payroll remittance, which can be a big help for a lot of people. So it's very smart, very creative tax strategy that my dad came up with. The problem is that when people don't plan for payroll and they use this deferral method as a way to not pay their taxes now, oftentimes they don't then have the money later. Like if you're deferring it and you're paying that money and you're setting it aside and you're investing it or doing something so that you can earn time value of the money, it's a great strategy. If you were just spending that money, you were kicking the can down the road. And we have seen this over and over again with our clients that they get to the end of the year and they just don't have the money for the payroll, or they do, and now we have to push things. We're pushing things down the road, and then years down the road, they take a full-time job and they've got multi-year catch-ups, and it can create a snowball effect that can actually be damaging. It is a very effective strategy if you recognize that deferring the payroll contribution to end of year doesn't eliminate it, and you should be taking that money and setting it aside and not spending it. So I'm almost of the mindset that more and more people should move to a monthly payroll, because we see not enough people being adequately prepared for end of year. If you're one of those people that's very well prepared and you're using this as a way to be more effective with your money, great. If you're using this just because you don't have the money in the bank to pay this, not a good strategy, and it's going to come back to bite you in the ass down the road. Pardon my language. If we want to stick with paying salaries, do you think we can apply for CEWS after the year end, August 31st, 2020, by proving that the income was lost due to COVID and reporting the final payroll numbers and paying source deductions? The feedback we got from the CRA agent was no, that you're going to basically be denied if you haven't made payroll remittances for those periods. I won't know until it happens. Quite frankly, if you're eligible, that's not a risk I would be taking. And if it is a risk that you're willing to take, then why not do it right now and apply for the 2 periods and make a payroll remittance in. So at the very least, what you could do is you can make 2 payroll remittances for April, and then go back and later and ask CRA to reapply to March if you got denied. Because you're already late with March now, so maybe that's a strategy to test this theory, is you go in and you make a March and April remittance today, and then you apply for March, and maybe wait to apply for March and April until after the April requirement is cleared, and then see if they give you March. If they do, then you're golden, then you haven't had any penalties. If they don't, then you can have them reapply the payment to the correct period and have them, and then reapply. And hopefully you will still be eligible. Will a recording of this be available to us as a point of reference for the guidance given to us? Yes, we will be making available. Normally this streams live on Facebook where you can go and get it. Unfortunately, we had some technical issues. I am recording it now, at least I believe I am recording it now. If all goes well, we will save it. And I know Jim has been a mention, said that he's willing to come back and do one more of these for us. And I'm always happy to do another session as well, if God forbid we have any technical issues. During the last call, you promised to post a Q&A section on the website. I can tell you Rachel and Jose are working on that. It's in the works. It takes a bit of time for us to get through it. Rachel, that's on you. So if you can expedite that, obviously we've got some requests for that. I have sent you many emails for the last few days with guidance for COVID, and I've not heard back from you to respect the fact that you're very busy. Should I be contacting George? My dad does not have the answers to this. He doesn't know anything about any of the programs. You can certainly contact your own account managers, but you will be charged for any of the time that you spend with them. I'm your free resource. Unfortunately, that means that you are not going to necessarily, if you want free help, it's not going to be speedy help. So, price and speed, not going to be one-on-one. So unfortunately, because this is free work, it is bottom of the priority poll for myself. I still have regular job to do. I'm doing my best to provide as much free help as I can, but you are not going to get instant answers on a free service, unfortunately. So look in the Facebook group, post in the Facebook group. We'll answer those channels as priority over emails, because we want to be answering questions live publicly so that they can help as many people as possible. Emails will get the lowest priority because that's one-on-one help that we're giving you guys for free. So I hope you can understand and appreciate that. Hearing that we use 52-week averages in 2019 as a baseline, but on CRA site, it says the following. baseline remuneration is considered to be the average weekly eligible remuneration paid to an employee during the period of January 1st, 2020 to March 15th, 2020. Yes, and that's why, so like I said, there was some big question for us about that because of the wording around what was in the legislation and what was in the thing. And so what effectively your baseline remuneration is going to be just that. So if you take your annual salary and assume that it's been evenly distributed around the year, so then when you do your application, the baseline salary will be in the first period, March 15th to April 11th, which is 4 weeks. And then the next 4 weeks after that, and the next 4 weeks, which will effectively be during that period. So hopefully that answers your question. Hope I read that right. Yeah, and again, so maybe I did not read that right. So it says, considered to be the average weekly eligible remuneration paid to an employee during the period of January 1st, 2020 to March 15th, 2020. So I have to read that because that's not my understanding. Baseline remuneration is based off of 2019, not 2020. So if you can maybe shoot me a DM with where you got that period, because it is supposed to be based off your baseline is the period, and I don't believe that they've changed that to my knowledge, but I'll double check that. As an employer, I have had to reduce an employee's salary from 120K to 60K. I've applied and received a 40% subsidy. Does that 40% pass through to an employee, topping him up? I'm assuming that you're doing the work share program, and in which case the work share program, just like the TWS, will reduce what you will get from the emergency wage subsidy. So I hope I'm reading that correctly, and that's what you're asking. Can those funds be used to help pay the total of this? And again, I apologize. I'm not really fully understanding this. As an employer, I'm going to read it one more time. I have had to reduce an employee's salary from 120K to 60K. Okay. I've applied and received a 40% subsidy. Does that 40% pass through to the employee, topping him up to 84K, or can those funds be used to help pay the total? I mean, I don't know what program it is, so it will also depend on what that program is. So maybe send an email to the COVID support line, and we'll see to give you some more answers on that. Question, what is the Facebook group called? I apologize. It's called the Self-Employed Support Network. And if you Google self-employed, or if you search Self-Employed Support Network in Facebook, you will get access to the group. Thank you for asking, Diane, and please do share. When you switch from annual to monthly source deductions, if you have not paid source deductions until April 30th, what will be the penalty for a $100,000 salary? So the penalty will be a percentage of the remittance. It's 10% of whatever the remittance amount is for that period. And again, as I said, at April 30th, for $100,000 salary, you would not be late yet. So you would be, you're not actually late for April 30th yet, but it would be 10%. And last question of the day. My business has one person. I am an employer and employee. Can I use CEWS? I went from 5 days to 3 days a week in April. So that is you're a non-arm's length employee. And yes, but you are limited to your baseline remuneration. So keep that in mind. One more question came through. Since the deadline to pay for April is today, can you please give us the amount for CPP and taxes now for a salary of $58,725? Yeah, I can probably do that. You're gonna have to bear with me a second. So bear with me a second and I'll try and dig that up. I think that's probably fair to have. So I'm going to need quite a few moments in order to do this because I got to get into my system and get everything, but I think why not do it? Bear with me just a second here, guys. This will take a minute, as I said. How will we know if we are? They will let you know once you're approved. And also they are letting people know when they are denied. So you will get a notification. Sorry, system's still booting up. Unfortunately, as I stream live, it makes my system even slower. How do they advise? My understanding is that they're doing it by phone. As well as in writing as well, I should say. I know this whether do you have any info for the CEWS? So I don't really have much information about the CESB program. I know, in fact, another person has asked me some information about that. So we're in the process of gathering it. It has not been truthfully a big area of focus for myself, just because it's not really applicable for most of our clients. We do have a couple of clients whose kids are being affected by this. So we'll be releasing more information about this in the coming days. Okay, Mike has shared the link for the CEWS. So I do have, Mike, I'll take that offline and look at that. That's certainly not consistent with all the information that we had up to prior. I mean, things are changing so rapidly. Maybe that change has been made that I have overlooked. I will double check that. Yeah, Rachel's also pointing out the clients can also use the online CRA payroll calculator, although that is a little harder to complete than our spreadsheet. It's actually more accurate, but a lot harder. So I'm almost in there now. I swear. And Rachel, would you mind posting that in the chat so everyone has access to that calculator as well? Please and thank you. Okay, we have the spreadsheet up and running. Let me share my screen here. and we'll share this spreadsheet out again through the Facebook group. So for one employee with an annual payroll remittance of $5,875, we would looking at a total payroll remittance of $16,022. Divide that by 12, and you are looking at $1,335 $1,335 remittance on that, including the payroll and including income tax and CPP portion. And this is for a non-arm's length employee, obviously, who is not eligible for EI. So hopefully that does give you your question. Again, there's some other tips and tricks. We can lower that because that would be, you'd be looking at about $130, $140 penalty for March if you use that figure. What we do typically suggest is you can this could be reduced also by the TWS. So if you're eligible for the TWS in that period, which would be, I guess, this divided by 12 times 0.1, that would be reduced by $489. So now you're going to be less for your late remittance again. So again, that's something that you can keep in mind. We'll try and do a better, more in-depth calculator for that. But for the time being, you want to be making a remittance. If you're going to be on time, obviously go with the full 1335 and you can get the 489 back later. If, for example, you're going to be making a remittance for March, then you certainly want to make sure that you're subtracting whatever portion of the TWS that you're eligible for, so that you're not having more penalty than you need to. So I think that one's done. We'll look into this one. Thanks, Rachel, for sharing that. Have you tried to get an answer link from CRA for switching from? Can't get one. So the best we got was the agent. So unfortunately, we can't do any better than that at the moment. Is employer portion of CPP and EI included? Is employer portion of CPP and EI included eligible remuneration? Yes, because well, I guess not the employer portion. It's going to be your gross payroll number, so if it's 60,000, because normally employer portion is on top of that. It's another deduction inside the corporation. But typically, if you're doing in the tax planning worksheets that we use, it's going to be the gross number. So, for example, if it was if you paid yourself last year $120,000, then it's going to be $120,000. Like I said, divided by 12 to get you your, or divided by 52 times 4 to get you the 4 weeks period. So, I mean, there's some special tips and tricks around, the maximum remittance amount, particularly around CPP. So sometimes there's ways to minimize that by paying only the CPP. And I'm really going to have to look at this last issue because it's got me a bit perturbed. I wonder if it's an update. It's certainly not consistent with what the FAQs have been all the way along. And to determine eligible employees. And I wonder if that's for, was that for the non-arm's length or the arm's length employees? Mike, I promise you I'm going to look into this because if things have changed, but I also can tell you that we've had phone calls with the CRA agents and we've discussed specifically using the baseline of 2019 as the baseline remuneration. And in theory, again, we're going to be having a baseline of that for the whole period as well, because we're going to do an annual salary, which in theory is spread out over the whole year as well. So I'll do some digging on that, but I don't think I can answer that right now. Any other questions? Yeah, and yeah, to be safe, I would certainly do that. Pay baselines on or pay monthly remittances right now on somewhere between 58,725 and 60,000. As we've said, for 58,725, that's a monthly remittance of $1,335.18. If I bump that up to 60,000, just to give you a bit of a buffer, which is probably not a bad strategy, it's now going to be, pardon me, $1,366.68. Okay, so somewhere in that range is probably the monthly remittance you want to be making between now and the end of the year to make sure you're getting the maximum benefit. Okay. Does your source deduction include employer and employee CPP? Yes. Anything else, everyone? I know we've gone again about a half an hour long today. It seems to be the modus operandi. I don't understand the question. What if you already paid? I know you're going to need to provide some more information on that. I unfortunately don't know what you mean. Based on bonus payment. If you've already made remittances for the fiscal year 2020, then obviously you only need to worry about the amounts you're being paid in this period. So again, maybe better to understand in a specific situation. I'm assuming that you made a big payroll remittance for like, maybe February or something like that, or January, and did a payroll. I mean, that is possible with some people if you had like a July or August year end. And then again, I would say that the plan is probably going to be, I would still switch to monthly payroll. It gets a little bit harder when you've done the full remittance for the period. It's definitely a trickier situation. If it were me and I've got the cash flow, I would do CPP only payments for every other month going forward, just to be safe. So no tax, but CPP only. You're going to end up overpaying. You'll get a refund at the end of the year when you file your personal tax returns. But at least gives you a safer leg to stand on. Yeah, salary was deferred to 2020 and 2019, exactly what I was talking about. And assuming that it was deferred into January or February, as opposed to something like March, or I guess even January, February, March, probably not April, because you would have been making that remittance right now. But I would say at least for the next 3 months, for February, March, and April, I would make a remittance. It would make a payroll remittance of just the CPP portion. Okay, that looks like that's the last of our questions. Again, thank you, everyone. We will try to get this webinar recording up somewhere where people can access it. And Mike, if you can shoot me an email, because I don't know which Mike this is, shoot me an email through either my personal email or COVID-19@CPA4IT so that I can make sure to give you a specific response. I will also make sure that if there are any updates that make this now based off of January to March instead of the prior year, which was our baseline understanding going prior to this, I will make sure we send a mass email to all clients. I do not believe that is the case, but Mike, I will respond to you personally as to why, and if there are any changes, I will respond to everybody. Okay, thanks everyone. Have a great day, and bye for now.